Hey friends, tonight we'll walk right through the heart of medieval winter life. The huts, the hearths, and the humble wisdom that helped ordinary families outlast the cold. Hook, frost rims the eaves. The road is a pale ribbon, and smoke lifts in blue threads from low thatched roofs. Inside, a quiet glow, and the soft rustle of wool and straw. Before we begin, please like and subscribe only if this truly helps you unwind. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, lie back and get comfortable. Let's begin tonight's story. Hello, dear listener, and welcome to our tale of how medieval peasants kept warm with almost nothing. Chapter 1. The House That Breathed Warmth. The first breath of the village night is a white cloud. It lingers above the fields and hedges, above the sleeping orchard where last autumn's windfalls have long been gathered, above the thin path that snakes between plots of stubbled earth and muddy ruts. A curfew bell murmurs from the church tower low, steady, a gentle command to bank the fires and close the shutters. And so, one by one, the cottages draw into themselves like creatures tucking heads beneath wings, and the winter night begins. Step closer, softly. A door is pushed inward with a muffled creak. The hinge is oiled with animal fat, and the latch is a leather thong, polished by years of hands. The door opens to a single room, a hall, a hearth, a home, its roof pitched like a sheltering palm, thatch heavy with frost and sweet with the faint, smoky scent of summer reeds. The walls are wattle and daub, a lattice of pliant hazel, smeared with clay and straw and dung, then lime-washed so that by day they hold a quiet, chalky brightness, and by night they glow like old bone in the firelight. The floor is tamped earth. Rushes lie scattered with dried sweet herbs that crackle underfoot, releasing a green memory of warmer months with every step. At the center waits the hearth, not a grand stone moor, but a low circle of field rock and baked clay. Fire rests there, banked, a smouldering heart tempered for the long hours. Coals cradle what remains of order and oak, ash and beech. No flame leaps now, night needs patience, not blaze. Over the coals, a blackened pot rides an iron trammel, pottage slow as breath, oats softening in broth with a salvaged onion and a sliver of last year's salt pork. What warmth the fire gives is husbanded carefully, as precious as grain. A child stirs the embers with a charred stick and covers them with ash, leaving small ribs of glow for the later waking. The village knows the rhythm of two sleeps. The bells said as much. First sleep through midnight's early hours, a hush of wakefulness when dreams drift away and small chores find hands. Then the second sleep, toward the dawn. Between them, a world of emberlight. On a wooden peg near the door hangs a hooded cloak, felted with age until it is a stubborn friend against the cold. Beneath it, a woolen mantle coarse, Spartan, but thick as loyalty. Clothes are their first blankets, pulled close through the evening and layered again for bed. Wool is the quiet hero of this season, a sheep's promise kept through carding, spinning, dyeing, and fulling. A peasant's tunic is not the fine drape of a lord, yet it keeps its charge. It traps the little ovens of body heat and says, "Stay." The linen shirt, loose, simple, has been warmed near the hearth. Folded, unfolded, folded again, each fold a small kindness. Over it, brise and hose, patched at the knee where labor scrapes most, and greased with tallow where the wind likes to bite. The stockings are darned, but they hold. The windows do not open to the night as glass does in wealthy halls. They are small mouths of light sealed with oiled parchment and shutters of oak. A leather thong ties them tight. Draughts, still find seams. They always do. The house is a living thing and breathes whether invited or not. So they stitch the seams with straw, tamping wisps into the cracks, press rags into the uprights, and pull a hanging cloth across the lintel to make the room smaller, to protect the hearth's little climate from the long, prowling cold. Overhead, rafters gleam with the tarry gloss of years' smoke. In summer, the smoke vexes. In winter, it blesses, for it clings to the thatch and cures it, and it lingers as a low ceiling of warmth that drifts down like slow, dark rain. A bed waits in the corner, more a small geography than a piece of furniture. A palliasse stuffed with fresh, clean, rustling like a field in miniature. The straw was changed not long ago. The old straw was tossed to animals or to the midden. 2 children will sleep crosswise at the foot. The parents along the headboard, a plank with a carved saint watching over, his face smoothed by fingers that have asked quietly for health, for harvest, for mercies seen and unseen. The bolster is chaff in linen, and a blanket lies folded like a brown pelt. There is sheepskin too, its wool gone coarse with use, but still honest in its warmth. On the hearth, someone places 2 small stones near the banked embers, river stones, smoothed by centuries of water. They drink heat as bees drink a flower's heart. Later, slipped into cloth, they will be little suns for cold feet, no braziers for sleeping. The village has learned the hard lesson of smoke and breath. Fire is a god who must be fed and feared. Better to trust wool and closeness, the crowding of loved bodies into a weatherproof island. Better to sleep where the world is small and warm. Animals settle beyond the wattle partition. The cow sighs and shifts her weight. She is the house's second hearth. Her warm breath fogs the air, and her solid heat wanders through the cracks like a large, gentle ghost. A sow grumbles, then goes quiet, and a handful of hens mutter above the beam where they roost. Their feathers tucked in careful order, heads turned backward for the safest dreams. Bringing beasts beneath the roof is not simply thrift or custom, it is a nightly pact. Their heat is a tithe to winter. In return, they receive the nearness of care. Bread is cut, its crumb dense and sour, made with rye and barley, and the stubborn patience poverty requires. The heel is dipped into a little ale, bright and thin, and the warmth of grain loosens the tongue. Someone tells a small story, not a saga, but a kernel with a glow inside. It is about a winter when the river froze so clean you could hear the ice sing, and how the miller laced iron spurs to his boots and skated a message to the manor before dawn. It is about how the old woman near the ford says the frost writes letters on her window parchment, and if you squint and lean sideways, they spell the names of saints. The story is not for truth. It is for the slow softening of the night's edge. The house listens, and the house warms. The curfew bell is behind them now, a memory fading like breath on oiled parchment. The first sleep waits, and so they begin the careful ritual of shrinking the night. The coals are tidied again. Ash is a blanket for the fire's temper. A wooden lid covers the pot to save what heat lingers. A rushlight is pinched low just enough to find the sleeping places without stumbling, to keep faces known in the hush. The rush was peeled months ago and soaked in fat from a slaughter that tasted like a festival. It burns with a friendly stink that says there will be light enough to wake by. In a corner, a chest surrenders an extra piece of cloth, a precious thickness of woven wool that will go over shoulders or under feet as the cold requires. The bed becomes a boat. They climb in as if embarking, and the blanket lifts as a sail. Backs find familiar hollows, toes seek the stone-warmed cloth. In the dark, little hands search for bigger ones, because the night is not lessened by light, but by touch. Listen. Sleep arrives. It has its own gait. Slow at first, like a cart on wet ground, then steadier as the ruts find rhythm. The house creaks as timber shifts, as frost settles on the thatch, as the last smokes of the neighboring hearths loosen and climb. Outside, the lane is a pale rope. Fox prints appear under the hedge, as if stitched by an invisible needle. The moon, not far from full, reads the village like a book left open. The furrows, the hedges, the frozen puddles that hold thin coins of sky. Men and women who spent their day with backs bent now lie as straight as door latches. The first sleep is deep and slow, and in it the body mends what toil unravels. But winter is long. It comes not in a single night, but as a season that tests and teaches. And so, between sleeps, the family wakes. Not all at once, not fully, but like embers, stirred, they glow. The mother's hand finds the little pot wrapped in wool near the hearth, the one where stones kept warmth for sore joints. She rolls them in the cloth and slips one against her feet, one at a child's belly. The father eases up and checks the cow through the partition slit, a moon-slice view of steam and hide. He listens for any hitch in her breath. Outside, a low wind works the hedgerow, but the shutters hold. What we call between, they call useful. There is quiet talk about the fence post that will need setting when the ground thaws, about a patch of roof where the thatch thins, about the saint's day that is coming soon, the one for candles, and how much tallow remains. A spindle appears in the half-dark. It turns with the rhythm of breath. Wool becomes twist, twist becomes thread, thread becomes promise. Even in the midnight winter is fed with work that keeps a home warm by other means. A nettle cord is knotted anew for the door latch. A leather strap is oiled. A child is checked for fever. Small economies, each one a thread in the blanket that keeps them through to spring. Hunger prowls winter's edges. Everyone knows its tread. Pottage is stretched with oats. The salt pork ration is cut thin. In good years, there were dried peas and beans enough to soothe the stomach in these hours. In leaner times, turnip shavings and mere broth. Still, warmth can be stolen from the cold by trickery learned over generations. Stones are heated. Beer is mulled with a scrap of spice, saved like a charm. Beds are shared so that heat is pooled, an arithmetic of bodies that multiplies comfort. A sleeping cap, narrow and plain, keeps what escapes from hair and scalp. Breeches are tucked into socks. Hands slip into mitts with the fingers together, so one's warmth blesses the other's. And when the frost finds its way beneath the door and sketches a white feather on the floor, someone rises and sweeps it out with the rushes, murmuring a word as soft as the brush's hiss. Now and then the wind falls away, and the village hears itself in a silence so large you can taste it. Frost cracks in the hedges like small knuckles. An owl makes the sound of old cloth torn gently. Somewhere, a new mother wakes to the sigh of her child and tucks him deeper into her cloak. And by the faint shine of ash glow, she offers milk that is warmer than any hearth. In that moment, the world shrinks to a circle no bigger than two faces and a sound like a swallow drinking. When the second sleep comes, it is lighter, ready to be broken by the rooster's notion of dawn. It brings a more elaborate dreaming. Men dream of fences set straight, of ploughs slicing black earth like cake, of barley heads bowing to the wind. Women dream of bread rising well, of linen bleaching white on the spring grass, of shoes mended without blisters to follow. Children dream of sleds made from barrel staves, of river ice that sings again. The house dreams with them, beams creaking in a slow, timbered lullaby. When dawn finally draws its pale line along the eastern hedge, it does not arrive all at once. It pulls in the low places and then climbs. The thatch sheds its frost with tiny sighs. The breath of the cow hangs in soft commas, then unravels. The fire is uncovered. Ash is brushed aside. Coals stir themselves into red arguments. A twist of straw catches. A stick of kindling confesses to flame. And then there is light, not the ghost of embers, but a living tongue. Within minutes, the pot begins its soft mutter. Warmth comes in waves, the sort that travel not just through air, but through hope. The village wakes a room at a time, a roof at a time, until smoke rises again in blue threads, and the day begins its slow weaving to survive the coldest nights. They did not rely on miracles. They relied on the intimate knowledge of their own small world. They made the house smaller when winter grew large. They trained wool to be a second skin. They learned the art of the ember and the patience of two sleeps. They borrowed heat from stones and beasts, from bodies and breath, from stories and the steady counting of what must be done when light is thin. They believed in spring because they had built it into their rituals the way a spindle, turned in darkness, is already a promise of shirts hung white on a summer hedge, and so under a sky that keeps its stars like secrets. The village lies another night behind it, neatly folded, warm at the edges, and ready to be remembered. Chapter 2. Curfew Bells and the Winter Lane. The bell in the tower speaks again, fewer notes now, like a hand laid gently on a shoulder, and the lane accepts the dark as if it were a shawl drawn closer. Breath hangs pale in doorways, shutters press their lips tight, yet not every foot stays by the hearth. There is a life to winters outside, a second village, stitched to the first, made of paths and hedges, and the soft commerce that passes between neighbors when the light's gone thin. Tonight we will walk there, slowly, so the cold cannot surprise us, and so the sounds that belong to night can arrive in their own time. The lane is a narrow ribbon of packed mud, stiffened by frost. Ruts remember cartwheels. Hoofprints, deeper at the heel, have set hard like old wax. Hedgerows on either side rise a man's height, bare of leaf and furred with hoar, their thorns white as the edges of breath. The hedges hold the night inside them, make a low corridor where wind softens and noise behaves. Here and there, a wicket gate leans inward as if drowsing. If you press your palm to it, you will feel the cold's clean bite and the memorable honesty of winter. Above, the thatched roofs shape the sky into dark triangles. Smoke threads through them, blue even under moonlight, and there is a scent of damp timber and dung and the last steaming of the day's mash. At the far end of the lane, the church rises out of the frost like a ship's stern, its buttresses steadying it against centuries. The bell is the captain's voice. It sets the hour when the sun no longer cares to. Curfew is not punishment here. It is a plea to prudence and a habit of safety. Bank your fires, gather your children, leave the tavern bench for tomorrow's talk, and grant the night its governance. The beadle has already made his round with a lantern's small planet of light, tapping at latches, nodding at those who nod back. In his hand, a staff polished by years of duty. In his pocket, a little bundle of twine for odd repairs. Because the night always finds a loose hinge or a half-broken thong, and would like it fixed before frost makes mischief, a figure waits in the porch's shadow, cloak drawn against the cold. It is the watchman for this week, a duty they share, like mending the ford after flood, or fetching a traveller from a ditch when the road deceives. The staff of office passes from hand to hand as the year goes round. But in winter the staff feels heavier, not for weight, but for what it means to hold a little safety in the dark. He listens for the ordinary. The fox's quick footfall, the owl's mild complaint, the cow that coughs in the field listened to, the gate that shivers because a hinge forgot to be quiet. He listens also for the wrong things, voices where no business should be, feet that hurry without cause, the whispered laugh of lads with too much cider in their courage, the hiss of sparks where they ought not to be. The watchman is not a knight, he is a neighbour. His business is not glory, it is the simple promise that tomorrow will find the village still standing. Out in the lane, the moon is working, turning frost to a powder of light, tucking a grey coin into every puddle. If you look closely, you can read the weather in the signs the sky writes for those who care to know. A halo around the moon that hints at snow, a brittleness in the stars that says the cold will hold. Men who plough in spring consult such pages because seed is expensive in the heart and in the purse. Tonight, though, the knowledge is for smaller things: when to stir the coals, whether to lay a second blanket, if the morning's water will be glass and therefore need breaking before anyone can drink. Between houses, warmth travels as if it had its own feet, not in great trudging strides, but as small errands, tokens, and kindnesses that pass through the frost as easily as a cat. A crock of pottage wrapped in cloth and carried under a cloak to the widow who has not much fuel, a twist of extra wool for the neighbour whose last lambs died, and so whose winter is thin of fleece, a tiny parcel of dried thyme to perfume tomorrow's rushes, a charm of nettle cord to replace the frayed door latch, so draughts lose their favourite road. And, as old as the first hearth, there is the ancient traffic of fire itself. Borrowing flame is older than asking for salt. A girl comes down the lane with a clay pot held in both hands, ash heaped high to keep what heat she begged from the steward's kitchen 2 doors up, a coal the size of a plum buried like treasure. She walks carefully, so the ember does not wake and try to breathe. At home, she will tuck it into her own ash-sleeping hearth, and talk to it as if it were a guest. Every house in the village has borrowed and lent fire. It is a form of friendship that leaves soot kisses on the thumb. Listen to the barn. The great door is dragged an arm's width to let the day's damp escape. Threshing has finished. The drifted chaff smells like summer in disguise. Somewhere within, a man lifts a flail to lay the last gentle strokes on barley heads. It is late for threshing, but work in winter is a choir whose voices come in at different times. By lamplight, grain yields to rhythm, and rhythm warms a body almost as well as ale. The lamp is not proud. A rush floats in fat, and that is enough to teach darkness to mind its manners. When the last seeds shiver loose, the man rubs his hands, not to chase away the cold, but to enjoy the dry rasp, then nets the lamp, and the barn goes back to being a stored summer. Near the smithy, cold irons sleep like seals on a tidal shore. There are brands and hinges, nails by the handful in a sack that was once a flour bag. The forge is a black blossom. Tomorrow, if the wind eases, the smith will wake it. Tonight, the quenching trough holds a skin of ice with a dark window below. Along the fence, a hedge layer has set aside a neat stack of cuttings for fuel. Hazel and ash trimmed from the villagers' rights in the common wood. He will carry them home, 1 bundle each night, inside his cloak, like a secret he means to share. Coppice is a plant that feeds itself. Cut, grow, cut again, and winter behaves. A man with a basket steps away from the priest's house. moving like someone who has learned to walk without bothering the night. Inside are candles that smell faintly of sheep and smoke. The feast for blessing candles is near. The whole village will glow like a small constellation then, and mothers will pinch wicks so they burn slow and thrifty. For now, the candles are careful promises for the hours between first and second sleep. He will knock softly at 2 doors and leave 2 short tapers in exchange for mending done last week. A tear in a sleeve neatly married, a hood's lining coaxed back into place. Night makes barter more honest. No one counts too sharply by moonlight, and so the watchman moves along the lane, staff tasting the ground, lantern's wick trimmed with a nail. A lean dog follows at a polite distance, not his, not anyone's, but the villagers in a way that rights rarely bother to pass. Where the lane meets the open strip fields, the sky rolls fully into itself. The furlongs lie pale, furrows frozen into ridges like a sleeping sea. The reeves marks are there if you know where to look. Little stakes that remember last division, a ribbon of straw where the boundary bent around a stubborn stone, and beyond the common pasture, night-owned now and speaking softly in the breath of sheep. They are clumped in a way that declares their confidence in wool and in one another. Tomorrow they will lose the hedge for ivy and steal what leaves the cottagers have not yet thought to feed them. The watchman turns back, and the lane gathers him again. At a door, he pauses and touches the lintel, as if measuring it. Not a superstitious habit. The lintel is steady. Inside, he can hear the half-words of someone in the between hours talking to a child and to the embers. It is only the wind. Turn, tuck your toes. I am here, at the next house, a cough that is too wet. He will mention it in the morning when bread is sliced and the day's jobs are portioned out like slices too. At the next, even feet of 2 lads sneaking out toward the hedgehog run with a sack and a foolish idea. He clears his throat and taps his staff once, not to shame them but to remind the night that it keeps score. The lads turn and discover their senses go back into the warmth, where their mother will say nothing because she has known that idea herself and will know it again when the weather eases. Sometimes the lane opens. 2 cottages face each other across a little square where carts can turn and geese like to argue. There is a well with a beam and a rope bright from 1,000 hands. Frost furthers the bucket. Someone has left a sprig of holly tucked into the handle's loop. A joke or a charm, a shutter cracks. A woman passes out a small loaf to the lad, who will take it to his aunt beyond the mill, where the brook meets the road and tries to make both more troublesome. He goes with his hood up, loaf under his arm like a warm rabbit he intends to keep. He will not. He will be welcomed with a bowl and a hand to the hair and a story about the miller's rash. And then the loaf will be divided and survive 3 days as toast on a coal rake, dipped again and again into whatever stew is willing to be improved by bread. The quiet trade of warmth is not only wood and wool and fat, it is also words that know what they are worth. A midwife stands in one doorway, speaking low. You will not be alone. When the pains come, lift your eyes to the beam and count the knots. Keep hot stones wrapped for your back. Send the boy for me at the first streak of dawn. She sets down a small packet, rosemary and mint tucked in cloth, to sweeten the room and the breath alike. At another door, an old man gives the boy from upfield a story in place of coin, because he has not much else to spare in winter. When I was younger than you, I waited for the moon exactly there, and I saw a hare sit up and wash his ears, and he looked at me as if I were the odd creature and not he. The boy laughs into his cloak. His feet are not as cold when he leaves. Beyond the last cottage, the fields give way to the wood, black as the inside of a pocket. In summer, the wood is a parliament of leaves. In winter, it is a stern tutor. The villagers know where the deadfall lies and what can be taken under custom. They do not trespass on the Lord's live timber. The manorial court makes sure of that with fines that find their way even under snow, but they gather windfall and twig and furze in small armfuls that do not tempt a greedy eye. The bundles come home by many routes. Some ride the hips of women with tidy strength. Some perch across a boy's shoulders like captive brooms. The smallest comes knotted in an apron that has escorted grain in harvest, apples in the fall, and babies all year long. On the way back to the lane we pass the mill. The wheel is still arrested, as if in thought. Ice has painted its paddles and fringe. The race murmurs under a lid of glass. In the house, the miller turns in his bed and dreams of the first thaw. When water returns to its argument and the millstones hum like bees again, he keeps a ledger in his head, a promise of tolls and weights, divided fair, because by winter's end memory is sometimes the only storehouse that has not been picked to clean. And so the village breathes in and out. Some breaths are taken by those who keep watch, some by those who sleep, some by those who walk between because the midnight has chores that the day ignores. A leatherworker stitches a glove by ember light, the thread squeaks where it passes wax. A weaver's wife cards wool and hums in a voice so low only the mouse in the thatch can decide the tune. In the priest's room, a page is turned in a book that smells of skin and ink. Tiny letters stand up like winter hedges and force the mind to walk slowly. The book tells of saints who kept lamps against larger darknesses, and the priest thinks, as many do, that his people are a kind of sainthood to the ordinary sort, the kind that has no feast day and wears wool with a hole remended twice. The second bell will not sound. Its hour is kept by backs and bones and the faith of habit. Between first and second sleep, the village does what it can, and then the slow quiet gathers again. The watchman pauses once more beneath the tower. He shields his lantern and listens. Wind has dropped. Frost is thickening. Owls have taken their counsel from the hedges and moved to the fields. Far off, a dog barks and then does not. He touches the tower's cold stone, not to pray, but to acknowledge the good order of a night that has behaved. He knows that not all nights do. Some nights bring the unexpected, a traveller with a bleeding foot, a cottage smoke gone wrong and thick, a labour that comes too soon. Tonight brings none of these, only the slow commerce of warmth and watchfulness passing from hand to hand, a coin that buys a few more hours of comfort for the price of a little care. Back along the lane, the girl who borrowed the ember lifts her pot's lid and smiles at the low red eye within, then sets the clay back into ash as if tucking a child. In another house, the boy who took candles hides his nose under the blanket and breathes in their woolly scent, imagining the feast when they will all be blessed and held high like a little forest of light. And at the square, the old man stirs, coughs, and sleeps again, the hair peering from his dream hedge with the same offended wonder as always. By the time the east learns its first faint grammar of grey, the village is ready for second waking. Coals find flame. Steam laces pots. The watchman delivers his staff to the peg by the church door, where another hand will take it next week. He walks home with his own hands, warmed by the knowledge that he has moved through the night, without breaking it or being broken by it. And inside, where the lane cannot see, a mother presses a boy's cold toes between her palms and jokes that they are stone potatoes she means to bake. And the father says the fence post can wait if the frost is still iron. And a grandmother who has seen more winters than any bell can count says into the space between sentences that there was once a year when frost flowers climbed halfway up the inside wall, and they were beautiful as altar lace. To live through the coldest nights is to be plated into one another. The lane proves it. The bell declares it. The watch gives it shape. Warmth is a community and has 100 forms. A coal in ash, a word at a door, a staff under a moon, a loaf that arrives without price or pride, a candle that burns slow, so that sleep can be generous. In such ways the village makes a covenant with winter and keeps it, and when the thaw finally comes, not soon it will feel less like rescue than like a letter arriving whose contents were already known. The hedges will green where white once furred, the wheel will turn, the flail will rest, and the lane will lose its stiffness and remember mud. But the night lessons will remain, that a house can be made smaller than the cold, that a lane can be kept, and that warmth, when divided, does not diminish, but multiplies quietly, generously, like breath in the hush. Chapter 3. Woolskin and Ember, the quiet arts of warmth. The day's light is a pale broth, thin and kindly, and in it the village stirs with the slow confidence of those who have made a study of cold. Warmth here is not a single act. It is a craft learned over years, a grammar of small decisions. The house keeps it, the lane passes it. Now, step closer to the work of hands, the wool, the hide, the hearth, where winter is taught to behave. At the doorway, a fleece waits like a cloud that has chosen to land. It is not the white of saints' candles, but the living cream of sheep that have known rain, burrs, and the quiet blessing of grass. In spring, it will be shorn clean. In autumn, washed in the brook, until grease and earth make a milky swirl and swim away. Now, in the hush between chores, a woman cards it. The carders face one another like two little hedgehogs, teeth gentle but insistent. She passes a lock back and forth until it loosens into a tame fog, then twists, twists again, and gives the fog a spine. The spindle takes it up, turning with the rhythm of breath. Thread gathers on the shaft, even and lean, a modest miracle. Spin enough, and the loom will sing. Weave enough, and the winter will lose some of its argument. Cloth is a remembered summer. It holds sunlight from the field and the warm backs of sheep in its fibers. A tunic cut from such stuff is not a luxury, it is a promise kept. The tunic is long enough to cover the thigh, loose enough to layer, tight enough at the wrist to deny draughts their favorite roads. Beneath, a linen shirt kisses the skin with its cool honesty. Above, a mantle fastens at the shoulder with a simple pin, the iron black and trustworthy. The hose to narrow worlds of warmth drawn up each leg are hitched with points, small laces that tie garment to garment so no gap appears where cold can whisper. A cap closes the crown, for heat is a bird that loves to fly upward and away if you forget to catch it. At night, the cap becomes a sleeping friend. By day, a roof for thought. The men rub their wool with a whisper of grease. Not vanity, but weather it. A little tallow persuaded into the weave helps sleet bead and slip away. Women who work the dye pot know that certain hues feel warmer than they are. Madder's good red, woad's sober blue, once overdyed, with weld to a deep green that looks like oak moss after rain. Colour is not heat, and yet colour lifts spirits, and lifted spirits stand longer at a frosty hedge to mend a gap without wishing themselves by the fire. In winter, that is worth something. Children wear warmth as play. Their bries are patched with mother's quiet wit. One scrap from a harvest apron, another from a grain sack, another from a worn sleeve so that trousers become stories. They race to the brook, discover it thinking of glass, and learn to stamp its thin skin safe. When they return, noses red as rose hips, they are turned like pies, front to fire, back to fire, laughter to fire, then scolded softly for dripping on the hearthstones. A shrug and a grin, and the lesson is resumed on another day, because the school of cold does not close for weather. Fuel is the other side of cloth. In a corner, the year's wood stands, stacked so neatly you can hear order in it. Hazel from the coppice, ash from a wind-thrown limb, oak cut short and jealously saved for the chill that bites deepest. Furze bundles tied with their own stubborn twigs. A few peat turfs traded from the marsh folk, dark cakes that smell like earth, learning to speak smoke, dung, dried and stacked, honest and homely, a slow heat when all else is stingy. The village burns according to custom as much as needed. Green wood sulks and hisses. Seasoned wood tells the truth. A good fire is like a well-kept oath, banked, not bragging. The hearth has its own craft. Stones are placed not only for safety but for sense. A flat slab to set the pot where heat should kiss, not scald. A tidy ramp of ash to slide coals where they can be stolen later for a brazier cup to warm hands before bed. A long hook, black and sure, to lift the trammel, and a shorter one to stir without waking sparks. Children learn the heart's language before letters, that red means patience, not touch, that grey means sleep, that the little sigh a coal makes when you settle it is agreement, and food, this is warmth that begins within. Pottage is no feast to boast of, yet it walks with you into the cold. Oats swell and keep their promise for hours. Barley yields a sweet strength. Beans and peas, when last year's store reaches kindly, make the broth thick enough to steady hands on the hedging knife. On good days, a curl of pork fat twines through the spoonfuls and tells the body that work will be met. On hard days, onions speak comfort, and a turnip gives what it has. Ale is the companion to this, brown and modest, safer than water in most seasons, its small warmth a thread woven through the day. In winter, ale can be coaxed into a posset. A splash is warmed near the hearth with milk, a crumb of bread, a scrape of whatever spice the house can spare. A heel of ginger saved since Michaelmas, a breath of cinnamon from a wedding once or failing spice, a whisper of honey when a hive was kind. Drink it slow, and fingers loosen. Drink it too fast, and cheeks bloom while toes remain stubborn. The village knows the difference, and minds you like a friend. There are other drinks for other hours. A caudle when fever prowls, thick as a nurse's confidence, bound with egg, and stirred until it wears a gloss like trust. A tisane of thyme when coughs scald, of mint to steady a stomach that the cold has narrowed, of rosemary to sweeten air and thought alike. Herbs hang from a beam in small parliaments, their voices distinct even as they gather dust. Sage, sensible, yarrow frank, hyssop, pious in its neatness. In the dark months, they do the work of gardens under snow. Work itself is a furnace. The winter tasks are chosen not merely by need, but by the kind of heat they grant. Threshing warms with its steady music. Hedging pricks blood to the skin and keeps a man's attention so that the cold cannot steal up unawares. Spinning settles a woman's shoulders into a rhythm that persuades breath to keep a good pace. The weaver's treadles make their own weather. A loom is a fire of motion. The fuller's foot, beating cloth in the trough, makes a splash and a song, and the steam that rises from the wetted wool is a small cloud whose scent is animal and clean and reminds a body that there are other seasons than this. Even mending has a warmth. Finger against finger, needle passing from cold side to warm side, thimble tap-tapping like a tiny bell that knows precisely where to call. Leather keeps cold from the ground. Shoes are not plentiful. They are prized. Soles are turned and stitched and turned again. Grease is worked in with a patient thumb until the hide gleams like a winter brook with sunlight on it. In deep frost, a second sole wooden patterns lifts foot from frozen mud and from the treachery of a puddle's clever lid. Gloves are a narrow economy. Fingers together when work allows, mitts warmer than five-finger pride. In the fields, the shepherd's cloak is a moving hill. Its wool weeps off the sleet. Under it, a man can carry his own climate and share a corner of it with a lamb surprised by the world's chilliness. Doors and windows are schools of thrift. Shutters are wed and wed again to their frames with wedges and rag gaskets. A strip of felt, sewn old cloak to old cloak, is hung as a drop curtain. The house divided into zones the hearth can master. The loft of the roof is steep enough to become a sleeping shelf where breath thickens and warmth pools. Under the bed, the straw is fresh, not only for softness, but for dryness, which is another kind of heat. The bedstead itself is a wooden geography of memory. The same knots under the same palms, the same creak at the same turning, the same night words spoken on nights like this until children can repeat them without knowing they carry a liturgy. The calendar offers its own coals. Candlemas comes early in the year, a feast of flame tamed and blessed. The church blooms with wicks held high, the wax and tallow breathing their animal sweetness. Beeswax is dear and keeps to the altar. Tallow is homely and keeps to the home. Yet every flame, noble or plain, draws a little circle around a face and says, "Be easy." The darkness obeys. A handful of days later, Saint Blaise is remembered for throats. The priest crosses candles at necks and murmurs protection. And parents nod because winter's cough has a way of claiming too much. And saints, like wool and ash, are among the village's stores against the season. Humours are argued in the mind and in the mug. Cold and wet call for warm and dry. A clove of garlic in broth sits well with the old, warming without swagger. Vinegar sharpens slow dishes and wakes the blood. Mustard seed pounded with a spoon's back burns in the manner of cheerful arguments among friends and reminds lips what summer does to fields. The physician in town, when town is not too far and the purse not too thin, would prescribe with learned words. Here, the knowledge moves from mother to daughter, from one neighbour's doorstep to the next, and is paid for in eggs and help with a fence and a story that can hold a child through the last minutes before sleep. Not all warmth is kept, some is invited. A neighbour comes in and stands with hands open to the fire as if receiving a blessing. The house expands to hold him. A second bowl is scraped clean and filled. News travels slow, careful, like a candle carried through a barn. The reeve says the common will be opened 2 days sooner if the ice keeps. The miller's wheel sang once this morning without turning. The carpenter found sound wood in a fallen ash and smiled like a man who has heard a good joke. Laughter has temperature. It lifts shoulders and heat with them. The guest leaves, carrying away a little of the room's weather, and the house is glad. Not lighter of warmth, but richer in the ways warmth is made. Night returns, as faithful as rent and twice as insistent. The hearth is banked again, the ash smoothed like a page that will receive a secret before dawn. Stones are reheated and wrapped. The shirt that must be worn tomorrow sleeps close to the embers to wake kindly. The rushlight is trimmed so it will last until the hand that needs it most in the night finds it without haste. Voices fall. Breathing takes the room into its careful cadence. Between first and second sleep, small tasks will appear again. A thread to wind, a shoe to check, a cough to ease with a warm cloth. And when second sleep claims them, the dreams come easier because the day's arts were well practiced, and the cold was not allowed to be clever. By and by, frost will loosen its hold. The brook will show rib and then ripple. The hedges will be green like prayers answered in order. But the crafts of warmth will not be put away. They are summer's arts too, cloth woven, leather stitched, herbs tended, fuel husbanded against another turn of the year. The village survives not by sudden brilliance, but by 1,000 repetitions done kindly. And so, in wool and skin and ember, winter is made less of an adversary and more of a stern companion whose lessons, once learned, never quite leave. Chapter 4. The Shepherd's Breath, the Carter's Road. Frost finds the hedges first. It threads their thorns until each twig wears a pale sleeve, then slips down to the stubble where last year's barley bowed. The fields look as though a white hand has pressed them smooth. In that wide quiet, before the sun amounts to more than a pale intention, two figures move where the lane loosens into open ground, one with a crook and a slow step, the other with a horse that leans like a small hill when it exhales. The shepherd and the carter keep a different clock than the hearth and loom. Their warmth is not only taken from fire, but made in motion, in breath, in the knowledge of distances. The shepherd's cloak is his first field, thick, felted by storms, cut long so that it carries a pocket of weather inside. He stands with one boot on a gate trail and listens to sheep thinking. Their thoughts are not complicated. They are the clean arithmetic of rumen and shelter, of what the wind intends and whether the ground will forgive a hoof. This morning he will walk them from the fold to the common, but not without judging the frost's temper. Sharp frost gifts the earth a brittle strength. The turf will hold and not be bruised. Thor is a liar. It looks like kindness and behaves like a thief, stealing warmth and sound footing, purling mud into a chill that swallows ankles. He knows the difference by smell as much as by sight. The fold sits where it can bless the field. Overnight, the sheep slept tight within hurdles of woven hazel. They were not merely kept. They were asked to lend the land what their bodies could afford. Come spring, the folded plots will gift their gratitude in green. Manure is winter's quiet seed, spread grain by grain while constellations watch and say nothing. The shepherd has chosen the place with the reeve, who knows the lord's strips and the tenant's strips and the history of each. Like a psalter he can read with his eyes closed. So the sheep have done their work as they dreamed, and will do it again wherever the hurdles are shouldered next. He lifts a hurdle, the frost rime snapping like the first bite of an apple. Dog and staff do the knowable dance. The dog's mind is a wheel, and the flock's mind is water. He brings the wheel to stream and carves a channel the shepherd can walk in. No shouting, no hurry, only that low whistle which cuts the damp like an oar. The sheep flow. Their backs are pale islands that drift in order wherever the shepherd hints. There are ewes heavy with promise. He marks them with a look and keeps them to the gentler slope. There is a weather that thinks too much. The dog minds his vanity for him without insult. Beyond, the common lies open, ringed by hedges that recount in thorns what the village has agreed in words. Here old rites move like the sun, steady and unbothered. A woman with a bundle of furs steps aside for the flock and swaps news instead of thanks. A boy carries a crooked stick, twice his size, and dreams of being taller than hedges. The shepherd nods to them all because a nod is also a tithe and buys a portion of luck. He reads the day with his whole body. The wind out of the east has a taste of iron. that means the brook's skin will hold until noon. He can cross it where willow roots make handholds. It also means the lamb that came last evening will need a corner of his cloak. If the sun mislays itself, he checks the lamb by memory, by the beaded line of milk dried into the ew's wool, by the way she stamps at the dog but only once, by the lamb's head angling sure as a needle to the teat. All is well. The lamb wears that glistening look of small engines running properly. On the rise, he stops and turns his back to the wind. A shepherd learns what walls cannot teach, how to be one's own shelter. He eats standing heel of rye bread pressed to a wedge of hard cheese, the flavor generous as if it trained itself to be bigger than it is. He drinks from a horn that tastes faintly of summer and keeps the ale from remembering it is thin. The dog receives his portion by habit. Food warms more than the stomach. It convinces the spine. When he is done, he turns again, cloak like a moving hedge, staff like a promise, and the flock resumes its slow commerce with frost and distance. Where the common dips, hoarfrost has arranged itself into feathers. The sheep tread through and lay their white onto the ground with such care that the air looks suddenly emptier. A robin lands on the crook and calls as if opening a market. The shepherd answers by not moving. Ditches rimmed with ice are stepped across, not stomped, so that the crust trusts you and gives a clean sound rather than a treacherous break. He checks the sky's grammar, a long gauze of cloud drawn thin from north to south. Snow, he thinks, not much, a polite visit. He pockets the thought. Farther off, where the lane remembers it, must join the broader road. The carter is already measuring the day with wheel and hoof. His mare breathes steam in plumes and is blanketed across the chest with a plaited breastband. The cart is not empty. In its bed lie sacks that smell of malt, a hoop of new ash for the cooper, a jar wrapped in wool that holds a hinge the smith has begged the farrier to examine. Iron speaks a dialect only certain hands can translate. The carter's coat is thick with last winter's mud. Its cuffs polish themselves on ropes and rails. His mitts are hybrid things, wool within, leather without, and their hems are stained dark where he dips them to wet a knot before drawing it snug. Roads in winter are fewer than propositions. Where frost holds, they are honest. Where Thor has argued, they are riddles. He shoes the mare with frost nails that bite when ice tells lies. He watches her ears. Ears are clearer than hooves. Ears read the road's mood and the cart's complaint and the far-off rumour of a bridge that's decided to object to freeze. He sets out at the hour when the ground is still reliable, but the light will not yet blind a man to the face of a rut. The first ford wears a sheet you could shave on. He breaks it with a pole. He knows the depth by heart and by the sour smell of the cold river exposed. The wheels nose in, complain, and then agree. He keeps a hand on the mare's rein, but trusts her judgment, which is better than his in water. On the far bank, he sets his shoulder to the hub and lends the cart his full back until the rim climbs free of shingle. Warmth is made in such moments, with breath and effort and a string of small, unproud prayers. The bridge at the manor's edge stands like a stern elder who has learned resignation. Its timbers sing faintly when a frost finds them. Today the song is low. The frost is just now taking its oaths. He goes across at a pace that suggests respect but not fear. On the other side, the towman lifts his hat with 2 fingers and receives in return not a coin. This cart is village, owing nothing today but a rumour. The marsh path is a fool's errand until noon. Better the high track through the gorse. The carter says his thanks the way men in winter say most things, with an economy that keeps warmth close. Hills, too. are winter's tutors. Up them, the carter walks. Down them, he leans back into the shafts as if holding the cart in a quiet argument. It will always win if allowed to talk too loudly. He knows where the ruts gather to become one rut that could swallow a wheel hole, a villainous thing that waits under a skim of water like a smile with bad teeth. He knows the lullaby where a man can stand and listen for the wind that comes out of the forests. Square mile without apology. He knows the style where a shepherd he has not met this morning will tie a ribbon when lambing starts in earnest, meaning, help if you can spare a hand, no shame if you cannot. Between them, the shepherd and the carter, the village learns the shape of winter beyond the door. The shepherd walks with warmth on 4 legs, the carter drags it onto wheels. Each returns with the day summed differently. The shepherd brings home the news of sky and grass and the health of hooves. He reports that the alder at the bend will need pollarding, or the next storm will write in branches where the lane would rather keep to words. He knows where a fox has learned to move like smoke, and where the hare sits, so still you can see the world turning round him. The carter brings back the tidings of other fires, that the miller's trough froze only at the edges, and so the grind may sing tomorrow, that the smith has a new boy who holds the tongs without flinching, that the monastery road is passable if you leave before sun and return by candle, that someone on the far side of the ridge has built a sledge that rides over ruts as if they were misspellings. Sledges are winter's sly answer to wheels, and the carter is not too proud to borrow good ideas. When snow smooths the road into the nearest thing to parchment the village will ever see, runners do what rims cannot. He remembers a year when they moved a whole stack of timber in 2 days by sledge that would have taken a week by cart. Pride warms hands for an hour. The right tool warms them all season. At midday, the shepherd goes still as a gatepost and lets the flock settle. Sheep draw heat from harmony. They share it as slate roofs share frost, evenly and without boasting. He walks the edge and counts, not with numbers but with a feeling for absence. The weather that thinks too much is present. The away with the notch in her ear is present. The lamb that blinks with seriousness is present. He sits with his back to a hawthorn that keeps a store of dried haws like tiny embers in its thorny hearth. He presses one into his cheek and remembers summer's vinegar. His dog sleeps with one eye open, because that is how duty chooses to rest. In the village, doors lean on their own shadows. Smoke moves in quiet dialects over roofs. The carter delivers the hoop to the cooper, who smiles as if handed a good joke, for a sound hoop in winter is a promise of barrels that will not betray ale. He leaves the hinge at the farrier's and receives in a wedge of iron shaped like a letter, meant for a misbehaving wheel spoke. He swaps a sack of malt for gossip at the brewhouse threshold and gains the kind of warmth that rises from shoulders when someone tells the next sentence you hoped they would. Then he sets for home before frost remembers to be rude again. Evening finds them both where lanes gather their travellers, like a mother collecting children who wandered only as far as the hedges. The shepherd's flock folds itself with a sighing of wool. He checks each face with a lantern's coin of light and praises the day by making no complaint to the sky. The carter backs his cart to its place with the humblest of triumphs, the kind that keeps bellies and stories even. The mare receives her mash, warm and fragrant, and noses his shoulder with a courtesy learned from years. Inside, their warmth is told differently than that of those who kept the hearth. The shepherd comes in, smelling of lanolin and hedge and a little of river, and lays his cloak by the fire where frost has made lace on its hem. He sets a lamb-sized space in his memory and promises it again to the morning. He eats with a slow appetite that belongs to men who have trained their hunger to walk behind their feet. The carter loosens his mitts and shows the well's rope left on his palm. They are tidy, as if drawn with a ruler. He drinks his ale warm and grateful, then finds the bench that knows his back's map and sits as if the bench were a friend who has kept a seat. In this telling, winter is not a single, hammering cold, but a braid of smaller chills woven with the ways people answer them. The shepherd carries a weather within his cloak. The carter carries a road within his hands. Each trades what he knows for what the house can give. Stew that remembers onions kindly, bread that forgives being cut thin, laughter that moves like the kind of flame that never bites. Stories come in too, riding their words like sledges over the day's unevenness. The shepherd tells of a moon that sets circles into the field like a saint's sign, and of a fox with a white foot who left his legend in loops. The carter tells of a bridge singing and a tollman whose hat keeps secrets, and of a sledge that floated over the worst place as if ice had learned manners. And so the night gathers its old arguments. Frost pushes its cheek against the window latch. The heart presses back. The house shrinks to the size it knows how to keep warm. The shepherd sleeps with the dog's weight, answering winter at his feet. The carter dreams of a road that goes on only as far as he wishes, and stops at a door where someone has kept a bowl by the fire, and a chair by the corner, and a story by the end of the shelf. Tomorrow they will go again, out past the hedge, where breath makes small clouds, over the ford where water keeps its grammar even under ice. Along the track where sun will find ruts and make them honest. They will carry warmth as surely as coals in ash. They will return with the village expanded by a mile or two, with news folded into their pockets like letters without ink. And winter, who respects such steady conversations, will answer with cold that can be managed, and skies that, even when stern, tell you plainly what they mean. Chapter 5. Bread, barter, and the manor hearth. Market day wakes before the sun, moving first as a rumour in the dark. Doors lift, latches murmur, feet find their shoes by memory more than sight. The lane, so careful of silence on other mornings, trembles with soft industry. Baskets set down, lids tied, cloaks pinned, a cough tucked into a sleeve, a laugh held close so it won't crack the cold. Frost has written delicate script along every hedge. The village reads it with the same care it will later reserve for prices and weights. And in the hush before the bell, warmth begins, not at the hearth, but in purpose itself. The kind that travels body to body like a candle passed from hand to hand. The first warmth is the oven's. Last night, the baker burned hedge trimmings and deadfall furs until the vaulting stones of the communal bakehouse glowed from within. Now, before dawn's face is sure of itself, he pulls the embers aside, sweeps the floor with a dampened broom that smells faintly of mint, and tests the heat with a little handful of flour. It browns in a heartbeat, good. Maslin loaves, wheat, married to rye, as most marriages are, with affection and necessity slide in on the peel. Their bellies plumped by yesterday's sponge, their crusts brushed with a whisper of ale, so they will shine as if remembering summer. The door is stopped with a board and clay. The oven keeps the village's memory today. When the loaves come out later, they will find their way into shawls and baskets and sleeves, and an honest part of the cold will be undone. In the manor kitchen, the day is an older, louder animal. Its warmth is not so much gentle as abundant. The great hearth shoulders a suspended pot and an iron spit. On the backstones, a line of smaller pans mutters like hens. A scullion brings in billets of seasoned ash and arranges them so flame has choices. A dairymaid skims cream with a hand steady enough to carry quietly through a room. Someone in the buttery measures out ale for the day's allowances, a pint for each pair of hands who will swing a flail or mend a paling, or turn the millstones when thaw allows. The steward has already unlocked the larder. Its air is cool and sensible. There hangs the autumn's diligence, hams cured with smoke and patience, a side of bacon hardened into thrift, a net of onions that look like small suns asleep, sacks of peas and oats that feel like insurance when you press your palm into them. Outside the kitchen door, the manor's poorhouse bench has noticed the hour. 3 figures settle with a dignity that does not require noise. A widow with a thread tucked into a cuff, a lad who works when there is work and waits when there is not, and a man whose back has the phrase "once strong" written into it. The almoner's pail holds yesterday's crusts and today's promise. When the cook has cut the loaves for service, the heels will be theirs, dipped in warm broth and brightened with a pinch of parsley, because kindness is a spice as much as leaf or seed. The almoner knows by heart who will come today. He also knows who will not but should, and will send a child later with a corner of bread and a word that asks no questions. The road to market pulls the village outward like a thread drawn through cloth. Families move in pairs and little groups. A woman with eggs cushioned in straw. A man with 2 faggots of hazel balanced like the scales of a modest justice. A girl with a jar of honey lost in her cloak like treasure from a quieter century. A young pig rides in a wicker pannier and grumbles about philosophy all the way. From the far strip fields comes the reeve with notes in his head. How many bushels of barley still stand in the manor granary, which tenants will need their rents forgiven in part if the frost holds? What the tithe barn has promised the priest when Candlemas passes and light remembers its obligations. The market is not a place so much as an assembly of needs with manners. Stalls remember their owners by habit. The potter near the north wall, because the sun on clay is a blessing. The fishmonger nearer the brook, because he likes to wash his hands between sales. The man who mends tin with a brazier he minds like a child. Voices take off their hats and greet each other properly. Scales are set, weights kissed by fingers that do not intend to cheat. A pair of geese discuss ethics at full throat. On a nail, a slate declares grain prices in a chalk hand that apologizes for nothing. Men read slowly, women read faster. Both think of cupboards and children and the way a winter can shorten a purse until it squeaks. Barter is the village's second alphabet. Eggs spell linen mending. A pot with a hairline crack says, 2 bundles of furs and a promise to bring more next week. A small wheel of cheese whispers, Dyer's woad and receives onion seed in return because gardens are agreements as much as fences are. The brewer's wife lifts her pitcher in a half salute. Her ale is young, not sharp, a good companion for mornings when the air plants ice flies along your lashes. She trades a jug for a dozen rushers peeled and ready. The very rushers that will later drink tallow and become the little flames that keep the between hours from feeling too wide. The church watches with a steadier gaze than any steward. Its shadow spreads across cloth, barrel, and basket alike, and inside, the priest has left a little wicker crate by the south door, a mercy chest for those who prefer to give without being named. A sack of beans appears there as if it grew between stones. A coil of nettle string joins it. Later, a pair of stockings, mended again but still honest, climbs in like a brace of fish delivered to a fasting day. The priest will know whom to bless with them when the bell speaks of evening. Closer to noon, warmth turns from trade to food with a timeliness that no calendar could improve. Near the bakehouse, the first loaves are carried like new moons, a soft thud when they meet a palm. Steam lifts with a sigh. Everyone understands. A cellar of herrings, salted hard, packed tight, no-nonsense cuts, a sliver for an old man whose eyes still read oceans from a century he never saw. A girl dips bread into a cup of hot ale, making a posset's cousin, and makes room for a friend on the step, because steps were invented for two. A piper tries a slow tune suited to winter's pulse. A child hums the rhythm before she knows it. By afternoon, baskets remember weight and become lighter, and gossip has done its rounds like a necessary warmth of its own. The tithe barn doors stand open just long enough to breathe. A clerk marks a tally stick with care. Notch answering notch, debt answered by grain, grain answered by prayer, prayer answered by the quiet arithmetic of survival. A widow finds that her eggs and mending and 2 lengths of cord have become a shawl of second-hand wool, coarser than she dreamed, warmer than she feared. A boy trades a nice story about a fox for a heel of cheese, and learns a fact about economics he will only name in the spring. Back at the manor by candlelight, the kitchen completes its promise. The day's pottage has deepened into something that tastes like memory and harvest both. On fast days, fish rides broth and looks at you with the frankness of saints. On other days, a morsel of bacon threads its generosity through the long spoon. The steward portions trenches with more fairness than some will admit. Liveries measured allowances of bread and ale, and found the hands for which they were meant. In the scullery, a girl hums to the rhythm of scrubbing while listening for the cook's call. Songs lay down heat that soap and water alone cannot bring. In a side room, the pantry monk from the small priory on the hill collects the manor's promised alms, bread for travellers, candles for an altar, and a jar of onions to keep in the cool for pilgrims who will begin walking again when snow forgets their names. And then, as if the day had breath to spare, the manor's upper hall lights its own happiness. The Lord is not a giant in this story, only a man who knows his responsibilities in winter tastes like hot wine. At one end of the board, someone has warmed a jug with cloves and cinnamon, saved for feast days. Cloves perfume obligations until they feel like kindness. The steward stands to speak briefly. To men ill but mending, a fence to be made quick when the thaw writes mud where order would stand, a lambing to watch. A rumour of wolves from a traveller that no one in the room believes, but will treat as useful in the telling. A nod goes round like a pewter plate. Decisions are heat. They allow the village to move tomorrow without shivering. When the hall settles and the kitchen sleeps down to embers, another kind of economy begins. The quiet divisions by which hunger is made into comfort. In cottages, a beet is shaved fine into the pot to convince taste there is spice where there is only thrift. A mother crumbles a crust and says it is crumb from a saint's table because a story, told well at a child's bedside, carries heat in the marrow. In the bakehouse, one stone stays warm enough to dry herbs on a cloth without scorching them, and the baker lets a neighbour leave chamomile there, because tomorrow she will bring him the small jar of yeast she has nursed like a tiny beast all winter. And so the village's bread will rise with 2 households' care. Fasts and feasts mark winter like stitches. St. Brigid's Day, Candlemas, the Ember Days, small rites that tether souls to a calendar older than taxes. On fast days, butter steps aside so oil may be remembered. On feast days, butter returns, and everyone smiles with their eyes. The church's calendar is also a cook's. It tells you when to stretch and when to offer. It tells you when the poor bench must not be allowed to grow crowded. and when the feast can be so generous, even the bench is empty because the room is full. On some nights, the manor gives a dole by torchlight. Bread, ale, sometimes a ladle of pottage into a pot held up like a prayer. The torches smoke and scribble dark on the air. The steward's voice counts in a patience that does not embarrass anyone who stands waiting at the edge. Children carry the news home on foot. Their footprints cross and recross like good weaving. No one says the word charity with their mouth. They say it instead by scratching flint, by opening the door, by placing a hot stone at an old woman's feet, and telling a joke to make her laugh and forget to be careful with gratitude. When the market's bustle has folded into night, and the manor's flame has thinned to a readable glow, the village counts the day and finds it rich in the right ways. The bakehouse door wears a crescent of flour where hands pushed it open again and again. The tithe barn has fewer sacks and lighter dust. The fishmonger's stall is washed and leans against the wall like a tired sailor. In the lane, 2 men quietly carry a new hoop to the cooper who will rise early because barrels hold more than ale. They hold steadiness, which is winter's sweetest drink. At home, bread is sliced thinner than summer would advise. Thin is not stinginess, but skill. A wedge of cheese meets the knife and makes a small sun in the palm. A boy, entrusted with the last apple kept in straw since Martinmas, divides it into as many parts as there are faces at the table, and then one for the absent aunt, because in winter you remember absences by sweetness, not by counting. Ale is warmed and poured low. The prayer is short and exact, mentioning frost and lambs and the baker's hand, and finishes with a word about the clerk who limps, because words are also blankets. Beneath all of it, barter continues the soft trade of warmth that does not need scales. A story is given and returns to sleep. A basket is lent and returns with onions. A smile is offered and returns as help at the ford in a week when the thaw will be a liar again. The manor's hearth and the village's stoves are not arguments, but parts of a single fire, the kind a season longs to see. The Lord's duty is to keep the fuel from running short, the steward's to keep the distribution from growing sharp, the priest's to keep gratitude clean of fear, the cotters and carters and shepherds to carry their own sparks carefully, light in clay pots wrapped in ash. Close to midnight, the village drinks the quiet it has brewed all day. A mother warms a wedge of bread on the trivet and tells the baby about Candlemas candles as if telling a tale of stars tamed and taught to stay. An old woman who once served in the manor kitchen runs a thumb along the bluff of a loaf and nods, because the bake is correct and the cut is honest. The baker dreams of ovens as forests of heat with birds nesting in their crowns. The almoner sleeps by the door with a habit of waking to any footstep that means hunger has remembered the bench. In the field, the frost knits the same white shawl it knits every night and lays it with courtesy across hedge and cart and roof. And when a house has finished its supplies to last, ale to brew, wood to split, a promise to keep for the poor bench, it banks its coals, lowers its candle, and returns to the warm arithmetic of 2 sleeps. In that soft country between first and second, someone mutters a price aloud as if counting sheep. Someone else whispers the line of a song learned at market. Someone says the word spring without intending to, as if language desired a warmer grammar. Tomorrow will come carrying its own measures. The oven will call for brushwood, and the tithe barn for care. The manor will pour ale, and the back house will make a moon of steam again. The market will recall its stalls, and the fishmonger will argue amiably with the piper about whether music tastes better in winter or in spring. The village will answer with the correct coinage. Work given, bread shared, warmth multiplied by division. If you'd like, say continue, and we'll drift into chapter 6, where night closes on a single cottage hush, lullabies, second sleep, and we take our leave at the edge of thaw, with the winter wisdom folded neatly for another year. Chapter 6. Second sleep at winter's edge. Night has folded the day into its usual neatness. Loaves counted, doors barred, embers smoothed into a quiet red map. Frost climbs the shutter like lace woven by an invisible hand. Within these few boards and beams, a cottage gathers its breath and makes a small world of warmth, no larger than love and just as sufficient. Tonight, we linger here, one hearth, one bed, one family, while winter holds its last long note and the year listens for the answering chord called spring. The room is a hush stitched with soft sounds. The pot on the trivet gives a sleepy sigh now and then, a last reminder of barley and onion and a mercy of fat. The rushlight is a thin star that minds its work. The dog turns twice and settles where feet will find him at midnight, a warm punctuation mark at the sentence's end. Overhead, the rafters keep their secrets, dark with smoke, polished by years of rising heat and the small weather of human life. They begin the first sleep, as they always do, not by falling but by being carried, drawn under by the weight of wool and the steadier weight of routine. Father's back gives up its stubbornness first. It remembers the cart's shafts only far away, as if they belonged to a story told to someone else. Mother's breath becomes a soft bellows that feeds the hearth with a kind of faith. The children slip into a dream in the same direction they run. Quickly, then deeply, a hand is found. It is kept. With the latch drawn and the shutter pinned, the house is a boat. The dark outside is only water. The bed is a little island that knows what to do with a night. Frost listens at the sill. In the fold, the cow sighs, and her breath is an argument the cold cannot quite win. The lamb in its corner makes a sound like a new word practiced in sleep. The moon drifts, undoing bells of light that were knotted around the lane. Somewhere far off, ice answers ice, a hairline crack travelling through a puddle like a thought changing its mind. The village is a field of low constellations, windows with the thinnest fireglow, barns where a lantern's coin of light has been spent and put away, the church that keeps time the way a stone keeps weather. Between first and second sleep, the house wakes gently, as if remembering that rest has two doors. The mother slips from the bed and moves as if the floorboards were her kin. She lifts the pot's lid, steals a spoonful for the cough that nagged the youngest at dusk, and sweetens it with a single raisin saved from Michaelmas. The raisin is memory. The warm spoon is a remedy. The father checks the ember bank with a stick, then draws a veil of ash back over the glow. He has learned the grammar of fire, and ash is the comma that lets a hearth take breath. He wraps a stone in cloth and tucks it along the bolster. Small sun, faithful moon, in these between hours, quiet chores slip their hands into the family's hands. A length of thread is wound. A tear in a sleeve is persuaded to forget itself. A shoe sole receives a sober argument from an oar. The eldest listens to the wind's unreadable letter against the shutter and reads it anyway. East, a little. The brook will hold through noon. The hawthorn will wear a brittle lace in the morning. In a basket near the bed lie sprigs of mint and rosemary hung from the beam weeks ago. The basket smells like summer folded carefully, and a pinch of its scent is scattered to remind winter that it is a guest, not a king. Stories live here too, especially in the between. The grandmother, whose hair keeps a pale shimmer of Candlemas in it, tells one without waking fully. She speaks of a winter so deep the mill wheel forgot its own name, and of how the baker learned to judge oven heat by the sound of flour singing on stone. She tells of saints who kept lamps, of a shepherd who carried a lamb under his cloak and called it ember, of a sledge that slid over ruts as if it was skimming the edge of a frozen song. The child who coughs once, then less, smiles around sleep. Stories are blankets that work from the inside. When the second sleep takes them, it is kinder for the pause. Dreams return bearing small gifts. The father dreams the road has learned to lie flat under his cart, that hills nod respectfully as wheels pass, and that the tollman, who is a serious man by daylight, tips his hat precisely to the horse. The mother dreams the oven's floor turns to an orchard, and loaves fall from branches into her shawl, warm and singing their own crust. The children dream of predictable miracles, that the brook flows backwards and brings a fish into their pail, that a hen lays an egg shaped like the moon and no one minds, that spring arrives in a cloak and shakes green coins from its hem onto the hedges. The night wears on. Frost adds its own pages to the sill. An owl writes one white sentence across the meadow and ends it without dispute. In the church, the bell sleeps with its tongue on stone, as if tasting the hour it will proclaim. The house keeps a steady temperature by instinct now, like a body perfectly at ease, and far away, nearer the manor, a watchman paces and does not need his lantern. His eyes are two wells that have learned to hold moonlight without spilling it. Toward dawn, the change begins not a trumpet but a breath. The window seems less sure of its ice. The rafters creak with a tone that might be hope. While everyone sleeps, Thor reaches a hand over the hedge and touches the lane with one careful finger. It withdraws, polite. It will return, and soon, but not yet. A lesson remains to be finished, and Winter, a stern tutor who loves his pupils, never leaves without reviewing what matters most. They wake the way old paths are found by feel, by habit, by the light that has practiced this hour all its life. The father lifts the ash lid from the hearth and finds red still hiding there, loyal as blood. A twist of straw greets it, a sliver of hazel courts it, and the room becomes visible in the oldest way humans know. The mother sets a little pot to warm the morning's first drink, not wine or coffee, those cities' luxuries, but ale encouraged with milk and a touch of honey, a farmer's gentleness. The grandmother sits and counts the stitches of a sleeve, because the spring will insist on children outgrowing cloth. The children watch for the dog to permit by yawning. When he does, they laugh, and the day agrees to begin. There are departures to prepare. The carter's mitts are warmed over the trivet and rubbed with a thumbful of grease, because leather must be reminded to stay a friend. The shepherd's cloak is shaken and its hem combed of frost, with the same care a man gives his beard before feast days. A small sack of oats is measured twice. A corner of cheese is wrapped in a cloth that smells faintly of rosemary, because the cloth was once an apron that often leaned over a pot where rosemary lived. The father feels at the mare's hoof for a loose nail in the shoe. The mare waits with the patience of animals who have learned that their portion of the world is ordinary work and good hay. Before the latch lifts, there is the little liturgy that every house keeps and no church prescribes. A glance at the beam that has held since the first snow. A palm laid for an instant on the door to ask it be kind in its opening and closing. A word that is almost a prayer and almost a promise, and exactly both. The mother touches each head with a kiss light enough to pass as breath. The father says what he always says before he steps into the weather. Back by noon if the road remembers me. The grandmother adds the words old women compose new each morning, by noon or by sense. The lane receives them like a friend who has been mending and now wishes to show his work. Frost is a shade greyer. The prints of last night's fox are softened at the edges. The hedges wear a trembling that could be hope or merely the memory of wind. Over by the fold, the cow stamps as if to test the proverbs about patience. The lamb nuzzles with the seriousness of creatures who do not know how to do anything foolishly. Near the church, a woman crosses herself and smiles at a child she does not know well enough to scold. The child walks as if practicing dignity and forgets, halfway to the well, to be solemn. Work recommences with a gladness too polite to call itself joy. The cooper sets a hoop by the fire and listens for the moment which will yield a small click no book can teach. The baker opens his oven's mouth and hears the soft gasp of heat released from stone. He knows the day will rise. The reeve leans on a gate and recites the fields as if naming grandchildren. The priest chalks a blessing above a lintel and pretends not to see the charm of red thread knotted there. Because saints and knots have an arrangement in winter, and it would be ungracious to revoke it at the door, by noon a change has settled enough to be believed. The brook's lid is no longer a certainty. Along the south wall of a cottage, a cat finds the year's first sun so thin it seems imaginary and yet refuses to be argued away. A girl opens her palm to count the freckles on it and is surprised to find one more, as if spring had made an early coin and paid it to her in secret. On the common, sheep nose at grass with a shy confidence. The dog pretends to be above such matters, and is not. Even the cold adjusts its manners. Instead of a blow, it offers a brisk handshake. Instead of a silence made of stone, it speaks in a language where breath and cloud negotiate terms. Men unbutton one button. Women take off a scarf and put it back on and laugh at themselves for the confusion. The market, which yesterday sounded like thrift, sounds today like a plan. How soon to sow peas, how sharply to cut the hedge, when to trust the wheels return to mud, whether Candlemas has told the truth this year and how to pay it if it has lied. In the cottage, evening finds them not richer, not poorer, but tilted toward light. The door stands open a sliver longer before being barred. The rushlight waits its turn instead of demanding it. The pottage tastes faintly of expectation. Somehow, turnip borrows flavor from a day that let the sun stand up straighter. The grandmother hums a hymn that mentions lambs and candles and the word welcome in a tone that does not embarrass anyone who hears it. The children argue about whose turn it is to sit closest to the dog and conclude astonishingly that both may, if they can agree, to share. The father tells a road story whose joke is harmless and true. A toll man who had to charge himself for standing on the bridge, and who paid in a smile. When they bank the fire tonight, the ash goes over the embers with a vigor not born of caution alone but of promise. Wool is pulled to chins with less urgency and more ceremony. The window's frost is a thinner script. You could copy it if your hand were steady. The cow settles and sighs, as if setting down her own winter's ledger. The lamb dreams such a serious dream that its tiny hooves move, and the dog, no fool, pretends not to see. Outside, stars wheel their bright grammar across the thatch, and the moon wears a ring so pale and distant it could be a memory or a plan. They enter first sleep again, and between hours return with their errands, a cough checked, a thread cut, a stone warmed, a story finished. And then second sleep brings a last kindness to winter, laying over it a quilt of acceptance that is not resignation but gratitude. When dawn comes, it will find the house ready, the lane deciding to be road again, and the field remembering green in its bones. The wisdom they carry out of cold weather is simple and therefore difficult. Make the house smaller than the night. Divide warmth so that it multiplies. Teach the body to work with the day and to rest in two halves, like a well-mended shoe. Keep ember, wool, stone, beast, and bread in their proper places, and honor each as partner rather than tool. Trust that spring is not a rescue but a return you have been readying with every careful act. Live as if the year and you were in a long conversation and each required the other's patience. Now the lamp is nearly done, and your eyes have learned its gentleness. The lane has put away its clever glitter, and the hedges have let their frost fall like old arguments finished properly. Sleep asks to come in once more, kind as a neighbor at the door. Let it, the cottage will keep, the coals will remember their lesson. The dawn will find what you leave for it. A house folded neatly, a bed that is also a little boat, a family who knows how to steer through winter and tie up at spring. And so the night falls quiet, carrying their whispers into silence. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss another whisper in the night. Until we meet again, good night.